When my husband Pedro proposed spending a few days in our country house, I accepted with enthusiasm. It had been months since we had had time to disconnect from the city routine. The idea of waking up to the smell of fresh grass and birdsong seemed like a dream. The property belonged to Pedro's family. It was a large farm. Hi honey, before continuing the story, I ask you to give a like to the video. It doesn't cost you anything, and you help me a lot. A kiss and we continue. With fields that sold on the horizon, a well-kept stable, and a small orchard in the back. In charge of the place was Andres, the stable boy. I had never met him in person, but Pedro described him as a reliable and dedicated man, used to dealing with horses and farm work. When we arrived, Andres greeted us with a warm smile. He was a tall man in his 40s, with strong, work-hardened hands. His blue eyes seemed to take in every detail, but in a friendly and non-invasive way. Pedro quickly immersed himself in his projects for the weekend, leaving me alone to explore the property. I walked through the fields, breathing deeply. Gradually, I felt the tension that had built up in the city dissipate, taking with it the monotony I had carried for months. The next morning, I woke up early, before Pedro opened his eyes. I put on a simple shirt and jeans, and decided to explore the stable. I had always been fascinated by horses. I found their majestic strength and elegance mesmerizing. As I entered, the scent of fresh hay and the sound of hooves echoing on the wood enveloped me. Andrew was already there, grooming an imposing black horse with a shiny coat. Hearing my footsteps, he turned and gave me a warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am," he said in a low, calm voice. It seems that horses have aroused his curiosity. I shyly approached him and smiled back. "They are beautiful. I haven't seen horses this close since I was a child." Andres nodded, continuing his work with sure and precise movements. "This one is called Lightning," he commented, pointing to the black horse. "He is one of the quietest, but also one of the fastest. I don't know why, but his calmness and passion for his work intrigued me. I found myself asking him questions about everything from how they trained the horses they ate to how he earned their trust. Andres would patiently answer, looking me in the eye from time to time, as if trying to decipher something beyond my words. On the way back to the house to prepare breakfast, I couldn't stop thinking about Andres and the serenity he radiated. There was something about him, an authenticity that made him fascinating. The third day at the farm began with a clear sky and a light breeze that brought with it the scent of hay. Pedro was already busy with his business, leaving me free to decide how to spend the morning. Without hesitation, I returned to the barn. When I arrived, Andres was working with another horse, a splendid white specimen named Me. When he saw me, he looked up and gave me a smile, surprised to see me so early. "Good morning, madam. You have already been so captivated by horses," he said with a light tone. "Good morning, Andres." I could not resist. I responded with a shy smile. There is something special about this place. It is so relaxing. Andres assisted as he continued brushing snow. Horses have a unique way of soothing the soul. They sense everything, fear, calm, even what one tries to hide. His words left me thinking. Andrew didn't seem to be a man of many words, but each thing he said had a weight and a sincerity that touched me deeply. He invited me to come closer, and with unexpected gentleness, he guided my hand to stroke the snowy muzzle. "Don't be afraid," he said. "They feel everything, the confidence as well as the insecurity." As I stroked the horse, I realized how close Andrew was. The warmth of his presence was almost palpable, and for an instant, I felt my heart beat fast. I slyly pulled away, trying to hide the emotions that were beginning to well up in me. I knew something was changing, although I could not identify exactly what. The afternoon passed with an unusual lightness. I couldn't help but think about Andres, about our conversations and how each word seemed to reveal more of his character. There was something in the way he spoke and looked that intrigued me deeply. After lunch, Pedro decided to go into town to do some shopping. "Are you coming with me?" he asked me absent-mindedly, without taking his eyes off his cell phone. I declined, saying I preferred to stay at the farm and enjoy the tranquility. I really wanted to go back to the stable. When I arrived, the stable was empty. The sound of my footsteps echoed softly on the wood. I approached Lightning and stroked his muzzle. There was something incredibly comforting about the way the horses responded to my caresses, as if they were capable of calming any tension. "You really like it here, don't you?" said a voice behind me, making me gasp a little. I turned and saw Andres holding a rope in his hand. His expression was a mixture of surprise and amusement. "I didn't want to scare her," he added, approaching cautiously. "It didn't scare me," I replied, smiling slightly. "And yes, this place has something special. I feel different here." We continued to talk, this time without reservation. He told me how he had come to work on the farm and how much he loved horses. I, for my part, shared little snippets of my life, carefully omitting the feeling of abandonment I had long felt with Pedro. Late in the afternoon, as I walked back to the house, I realized that I was looking forward to the next day. The next morning, I decided to stroll through the fields before heading to the barn. The cool morning air brought with it the scent of damp grass, and the sun was beginning to warm the earth. Pedro was engrossed in his business as usual and did not notice my absence. He greeted me with a smile, and his voice had a carefree tone. "Would you like to help me?" she asked with a hint of humor. "I promise not to overwork you." "Why not?" I replied, surprised by my own response. Something about the way he spoke made me feel comfortable. Andres taught me how to lift the hay cows without hurting myself. Every time he corrected my movements, his hands brushed the miles, and that contact, though brief, sought a slight shiver on my skin. I couldn't help it. There was something electric about his presence. After a while of work, we sat down on a wooden bench near the stable entrance. He offered me a bottle of water, and when I took a sip, our eyes met. It was a moment that seemed to last an eternity. No one said anything, but they didn't need to. "You're not used to this kind of life, are you?" Andres broke the silence. "No, not much," I answered with a shy smile. "But it has its charm. Not everyone understands it," he commented, looking out over the fields that stretched to the horizon. "But you seem to enjoy it. It's as if you were made for this place." His words struck a chord with me. Was he just referring to life in the country or something else? As I walked back to the house, I couldn't stop thinking about him and the silent connection that was forming between us. Over the next few days, visits to the barn became almost routine. Any excuse was a good one to spend time with Andres. Every conversation seemed to deepen the bond that was forming between us, a silent but powerful bond. That morning, I watched him as he worked with snow. His movements were precise, almost choreographed, as he brushed the horse's shiny coat. Although he was concentrating, I noticed that our gazes met more and more often. There was no need to speak. His eyes said much more than any words could express, and mine responded in kind, lightning, as if sensing the tension in the air, let out a slight whinny, momentarily breaking the silence. But even that could not dispel what was growing between us. There was something unavoidable in those shared moments, something we both felt, but neither of us dared to say out loud. One afternoon, Pedro informed me that he was going to spend the whole day in town to take care of some business. I felt a strange emotion running through my body. I knew I would have more time to be with Andres. When I arrived, the atmosphere in the stable was different, charged with an energy I could not ignore. Andres was feeding the horses, but when he saw me, he stopped what he was doing and looked at me with an intensity that made me stop. "Pedro is in town, isn't he?" he asked, as if he already knew the answer. Yes, I answered, trying to make my voice sound calm. I had some business to attend to. Then today we could spend some time with Relampago, he said, changing the subject matter-of-factly. I think he would like to learn how to guide it. His tone was casual, but there was something in the air that spoke of something else, something we both understood without needing to say it. I hesitated, unable to resist. That afternoon, Andres taught me how to lead Relampago. His instructions were clear and precise, and every time he corrected my movements, his hands brushed mine. I felt an inexplicable warmth at every touch, a warmth that seemed to ignite something inside me. Our eyes met from time to time, and each time they did, an invisible current ran through the space between us. When we finished, Andres walked me along a path that bordered the fields. You are different from the people I have met, he said suddenly, breaking the silence with a sincerity that left me speechless. I didn't know what to answer. I just looked at him, and in that silent exchange, everything I felt was exposed. That moment was engraved in my memory as a point of no return. That night during dinner, Pedro was talking about his business while I answered him absent-mindedly. My mind was elsewhere, in the stable with Andrew. Every moment I had spent with him came back to me with overwhelming clarity. His gaze, his words, his closeness, everything. Later, in bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Pedro slept. I could not close my eyes. My thoughts revolved around Andrew, to what he had awakened in me and to the tension that kept growing. I knew what I felt was dangerous, but I also knew it was impossible to ignore. The next morning, with my heart pounding, I made my way to the barn before the sun was fully up. Andrew was already there, as if he knew I was going to show up. His always calm but intense eyes seemed to tell me that he also knew that day would be different. The cool morning air filled the barn when I arrived. Andrew was leaning against one of the wooden barriers with his arms crossed. His deep, penetrating gaze took my breath away for an instant. "Good morning," he said with a slight smile, although his tone carried with it a charge that was hard to ignore. "Good morning," I replied, trying to control the tremor in my voice. My heart was pounding so hard, I was afraid he might hear it. Andres approached me slowly. His footsteps echoed softly on the wood of the stable, and each movement seemed to slow down time. "Horses feel everything," he said quietly, looking at lightning, but then fixing his eyes on mine. The fear, the calm, even the secrets. His words struck me like lightning. I knew exactly what he meant. Everything we'd been silent about up to that moment was now floating in the air, impossible to ignore. "Andres," I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. I had nothing to say. There was no way to deny the inevitable. He raised a hand slowly and brushed my cheek. His touch was so soft that a shiver ran through my entire body. The stable was silent, except for the faint sound of lightning moving in its corner. The wood creaked under our feet, and the scent of hay and horse enveloped us. In that instant, there was nothing but us. When the kiss ended, our eyes met again. The intensity of his gaze made one thing clear to me. We had crossed an invisible line, and there was no turning back. After that moment, everything seemed different. The air in the barn was thicker, and the scent of hay more pungent. Eidendown was thicker, and the scent of hay more pungent. Andres was still looking at me, his expression a mixture of tenderness and concern. "I didn't want to put you in this situation," he said softly, taking my hands in his. "But what happened? I can't regret it." His words echoed inside me. I couldn't deny what I had felt. That kiss was not a mistake, but something that had awakened emotions I thought I had forgotten. However, a wave of guilt began to wash over me. "Andrew, it was intense," I murmured, trying to find the words. "But I don't know what it all means. You don't have to know now," he replied calmly. His eyes filled with a reassuring certainty. Sometimes it's enough for something to be real. I looked at him one last time before slowly turning away. My mind was full of questions and emotions that I couldn't decipher, but I knew this chapter between us was far from over. As I was walking back into the house, Peter was already there, immersed in his papers in the living room. Seeing him, I felt the guilt hit me hard. Everything seemed normal, but I knew nothing was normal anymore. I spent some time at the barn. He nodded, completely absorbed in his business, not noticing anything strange. But I felt my chest heavy with a secret that could explode at any moment. That night, while he slept, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every moment with Andres came back to me. His words, his gaze, the warmth of his touch. It was as if I was trapped between two worlds, unable to find a way out. The next day, I tried to avoid Andres, convinced that distance would help me clear my thoughts. But it was useless. The more I tried to push him out of my mind, the more I found myself longing to see him again. Finally, I gave in. I made my way to the barn and found him tending to snow. When he saw me, he stopped what he was doing and approached with a mixture of caution and determination.
"Are you avoiding me?"
he asked, his tone soft but direct. Maybe, I admitted, feeling my heart pounding. "I just don't know what to do." "Maybe you don't have to do anything," he replied with a slight smile. "Sometimes things just happen, and that's okay." His words, though simple, touched something deep inside. I knew that what was happening between us was inevitable, but I couldn't yet imagine the consequences. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Every shared smile, every fleeting glance, every small gesture fueled the fire that burned between us. But at the same time, the weight of what I was doing was suffocating. Pedro, always engrossed in his own affairs, suspected nothing, but his presence was a constant reminder of the line I had crossed, and what might happen if the truth came out. I felt trapped, torn between the passion I felt for Andrew and the life I had built with Peter. One night, on my way back from the barn, I made a decision. I needed to talk to Andres to clarify how I felt and what this meant for both of us. But I knew that such a conversation would only complicate things further. The next day, I returned to the barn, determined to face what was happening. Andres was there, as if he knew that day would be different. His eyes, always calm but intense, looked at me with a mixture of serenity and restrained emotion. "We can't go on like this," I told him, approaching him with a trembling voice. "I know," she answered in a whisper, "but sometimes the heart doesn't ask, it just decides." I looked at him, feeling the words I had prepared fade away. In that moment, the outside world stopped mattering. The story is over now. But if you want to hear other stories of secrets and lies, click on one of the videos you see on the screen, and remember to subscribe to the channel to receive new stories every day.